The Interstellar Ecological Assessment Bureau had been classifying planets for approximately 4,000 years, which was precisely long enough for them to become insufferably confident about it. Their headquarters orbited a perfectly temperate moon, staffed by individuals who had never encountered actual dirt, and their assessment protocols had been refined to such bureaucratic perfection that they could declare a world uninhabitable without ever experiencing the inconvenience of visiting it. Verdis 9 earned itself a spectacular Class-7 Uninhabitable rating, which was impressive considering the scale only went to Class 8, and that final category was reserved for planets actively on fire or composed entirely of venomous gas. The report, spanning 300 pages that nobody would ever read completely, cited atmospheric humidity levels of 87%, aggressive photosynthetic organisms with documented territorial behaviors, and the wonderfully vague designation of psychological incompatibility factors. This last category was academic speak, for it made our researchers uncomfortable, which apparently qualified as scientific data nowadays. The forest in question covered 92% of Verdis 9's landmass, a sprawling expanse of vegetation that had evolved for millions of years without asking permission from any assessment bureau. Trees reached heights that would make sequoias feel inadequate, their canopies forming layers dense enough to create distinct atmospheric zones. The air tasted green, if such a thing were possible, thick with moisture, and the chemical conversations of a billion living things conducting their business with enthusiastic disregard for academic opinion. Naturally, the Bureau decided someone should go catalogue it properly. The expedition team assembled in Bay 7 of the orbital station, a collection of specialists representing 5 different species, each selected for their unique qualifications, and each currently regretting their career choices. There was Clawn, a Vraxi ecologist whose 7 eyes could perceive 17 different spectrums simultaneously, which sounded impressive until you realized it meant he got 17 times the migraines. Beside him stood Tix and Vri, a bonded pair of helix entomologists who communicated through bioluminescent patterns on their chitinous skin and were consequently terrible at poker. Rounding out the team was Quibble, a Netharian geologist whose species had evolved on a desert world and who consequently viewed any planet with liquid water as a personal insult. And finally, there was the equipment specialist, a towering grell named Morthax, who had enough certifications in safety protocols to fill a small library and the personality of someone who had actually read them all. The expedition briefing lasted 4 hours, which was 3 hours and 55 minutes longer than necessary, but bureaucracy abhors efficiency. They reviewed habitat pod specifications, sealed environmental units with climate control, atmospheric filtration, and enough safety redundancies to survive on a solar surface. They analyzed threat assessments, studied topographical data, and received 17 different emergency protocols that all basically amounted to call for help and try not to die. "Any questions?" the briefing officer asked, antenna twitching with the boredom of someone who had delivered this speech 60 times. "Yeah," came a voice from the back. "Do we get hazard pay if the pods are manufactured by Zelcorp? Because I read about the Class 4 incident last year, and honestly, that's horror movie material." Everyone turned. Sitting in the last row, boots propped on the chair in front of him, was the human. His name was Marcus Chen, though his file listed approximately 17 variations of spelling, because human nomenclature confused roughly 80% of the galaxy's administrative systems. He had been added to the expedition 3 days prior, when budget cuts eliminated their atmospheric specialist, and someone in accounting realized humans would work for comparatively nothing if you phrased it as an adventure opportunity. Marcus wore standard expedition coveralls that he had already modified with additional pockets, carried a backpack that looked suspiciously heavy, and had the expression of someone who found institutional incompetence personally entertaining rather than concerning. "The pods are perfectly safe," the briefing officer said, with the confidence of someone who would never actually use them. Zelcorp addressed those issues in the latest model. "Sure they did," Marcus said pleasantly. "Right up until they don't." 3 days later, they understood his concern. Verdis 9's surface greeted them with the aggressive hospitality of a rainforest that had never heard of moderation. The shuttle touched down in what the survey had optimistically labeled a clearing, though temporary gap in the endless green would have been more accurate. The moment the airlock opened, humidity slapped them collectively across their various faces, carrying with it the scent of growth, decay, and 1,000 organic processes conducting themselves with theatrical enthusiasm. 17 gods of the void, Quibble wheezed, moisture already condensing on his crystalline skin structures. "I'm going to rust." "You can't rust. You're not made of metal," Tix pointed out, his bioluminescence flickering with what might have been amusement. "Give me time in this soup. I'll figure out how." The habitat pods deployed automatically, 6 sleek cylinders that unfolded into climate-controlled sanctuaries with the smooth precision of expensive engineering. For approximately 4 hours, everything functioned exactly as the 300-page manual promised. The team unpacked equipment, established their base perimeter, and began preliminary surveys of the surrounding forest, while their pods hummed with efficient environmental regulation. Then Morthax's pod began making a sound that no sophisticated machinery should ever make, something between a wheeze and a death rattle. "That's not covered in the manual," Morthax said, which was his version of panic. Within 20 minutes, every pod had developed its own unique malfunction. Climate control systems struggled against humidity they had never been tested for, despite the Bureau's detailed assessments. Filtration systems clogged with spores that apparently found artificial environments delightful places to reproduce. Seals degraded with alarming speed. One pod simply gave up and displayed an error message in a language none of them recognized. "This is fine," Clawn said, all 7 eyes twitching independently. "We just need to recalibrate the atmospheric processes and reroute the thermal regulators through the backup condensation system." He tried this. The pod responded by becoming noticeably warmer and filling with a mist that smelled like burnt plastic and regret. Emergency protocols activated automatically, pinging the orbital station with situation reports and requesting immediate extraction. The response came back within an hour. Earliest retrieval window 14 days. Shelter in place and maintain regular status updates. Bureau extends its confidence in your professionalism. They extend their confidence. Vree's bioluminescence pulsed in what was definitely not amusement. "How generous." "Where's the human?" Quibble asked suddenly. Everyone looked around. Marcus had indeed vanished, last seen wandering toward the tree line with his suspicious backpack and an expression of focused interest that in retrospect should have been concerning. They found him an hour later, 50 feet above the ground. "What are you doing?" Morthax bellowed upward, all his safety certifications experiencing simultaneous cardiac arrest. Marcus sat comfortably on a platform he had somehow constructed between 3 massive tree trunks, legs dangling over the edge, completely unconcerned with the fact that he was suspended high enough to make death a statistical certainty if he fell. He had stripped off his expedition coveralls to a basic shirt, and his backpack lay open beside him, revealing what appeared to be an extensive collection of rope, fabric and tools that definitely hadn't been on the approved equipment list. "Building a treehouse," Marcus called down cheerfully. "Want to come up?" You're building a what? Clawn's 7 eyes somehow all managed to look horrified simultaneously, which was quite the achievement. Treehouse. You know, house in a tree. It's fairly self-explanatory. Marcus drove something into the tree trunk with a practiced motion, also making hammocks. You guys look like you could use hammocks. Have you completed the structural integrity analysis? Morthax demanded. Filed the proper safety assessments. Calculated load-bearing capacity according to Bureau Standard 47 subsection 12. Nope, Marcus said, already weaving something between two branches with quick, efficient movements. But I did give the tree a good shake, and it seems pretty solid. That's basically the same thing. It absolutely was not the same thing. You need to come down immediately, Morthax continued. This violates approximately 90 protocols, and that's just off the top of my head. I'm good up here, thanks. Marcus tied off whatever he was making, a hammock apparently, a simple suspended bed of woven material that looked absurdly flimsy and absolutely not regulation. He tested it with his weight, bouncing slightly. See? Perfectly safe. That is not perfectly safe. All 5 team members shouted in various languages simultaneously. Safer than those pods are about to be, Marcus pointed out, which was frustratingly accurate. Night fell on Verdes 9 with the subtlety of a stage curtain dropping, plunging the forest into darkness so complete it seemed almost aggressive. This was when the planet's nocturnal ecosystem woke up and reminded everyone why the Bureau had used terms like aggressive flora and psychological incompatibility factors. The forest became bioluminescent, thousands of species lighting up in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't clearly evolved for hunting purposes. Something howled in the distance, a sound that harmonized with itself in ways that suggested either multiple mouths or a disturbing mastery of musical theory. The acidic rain began, not heavy, but consistent, a chemical drizzle that hissed slightly when it contacted the expedition equipment. The alien team huddled in their malfunctioning pods, watching their environmental seals degrade in real time, listening to the forest conduct its nightly business just outside their failing walls. The humidity crept in. The temperature fluctuated. Something large moved past Clawn's pod, blocking out the bioluminescent glow for several concerning seconds. "This is a disaster," Quibble said, moisture literally dripping from his crystalline formations. "We're going to spend 2 weeks in failing equipment in a forest that wants us dead, and our best hope is that the rescue shuttle doesn't also malfunction." "The human seems fine," Tix observed, which was objectively true and deeply irritating. Marcus was indeed fine. From their position on the ground, they could see his hammock swaying gently in the canopy, far enough above the ground to avoid the terrestrial predators and positioned beneath enough foliage to shield from the acidic rain. He had rigged some kind of collection system that was actually harvesting the rain for water, and was that a fire? How had he made a fire in this humidity? "This is insane," Morthax muttered. "Completely insane. There are procedures for arboreal construction, permits, safety harnesses, engineering consultants. Those are all on the orbital station," Vree pointed out. "We are in a broken pod, slowly cooking in our own moisture, while the human is up in a hammock probably sleeping comfortably." They sat in miserable silence, contemplating this reality. "I hate that he's right," Clawn finally said. By dawn, Morthax's pod had accumulated an inch of water on the floor from condensation the overwhelmed systems couldn't process. Quibbles had developed an electrical short that caused random sparks. Tix and Vree's pod kept making a clicking sound that their translator matrices interpreted as either imminent malfunction or "please help me," and machine languages were distressingly ambiguous sometimes. Marcus descended from the canopy with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a comfortable night in a functional sleeping arrangement. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Sleep well?" The collective glare from 5 different species would have melted steel. "I'm building more platforms," Marcus continued, immune to hostile looks. "Figure you all need somewhere above the ground level. The canopy layer is actually pretty nice once you adjust to the height." "We are not," Morthax said with careful emphasis, "climbing into unsanctioned aerial structures built without proper engineering oversight." "Suit yourself," Marcus shrugged. "I'll just be up there, not drowning in my own sweat. There's actually a breeze up there, and the bioluminescent things are prettier from above. Some of them are doing this synchronized pulsing thing that's honestly mesmerizing." He started working on a second platform about 30 feet up, using the tree's natural architecture with a practiced eye that suggested this was far from his first improvised construction project. The alien team watched him move through the canopy with casual confidence, tying ropes and weaving supports, creating something that looked increasingly stable and functional despite violating every safety protocol ever written. "The Bureau is going to have questions," Clawn said weakly. "The Bureau is in orbit," Quibble countered. "We are in a metal sauna that smells like disappointment." By midday, when Tix and Vree's pod began making a new sound that the translator rendered as "Goodbye, cruel world," they made a decision. "How do we get up there?" Tix asked. Pride thoroughly swallowed. Marcus grinned. Carefully, teaching 5 aliens with varying physiologies to climb trees was an exercise in patience and physics. Clawn's 7 eyes kept calculating failure probabilities, which was counterproductive for confidence. Quibble kept muttering about the indignity of moisture-based life forms and their terrible planets. Morthax recited safety protocols like prayers, as though proper documentation could retroactively make this legitimate. But Marcus was a patient teacher, showing them handholds, testing branches, creating rope assists for particularly challenging sections. He had already constructed a simple pulley system to haul equipment, because apparently he had packed rope engineering into his unauthorized backpack alongside everything else. Tix made it up first, his chitinous limbs actually well suited for gripping bark. Vree followed, their bioluminescence pulsing with what might have been excitement. Clawn came next, closing 6 of his 7 eyes to reduce the overwhelming sensory input of height. Quibble required significant encouragement and possibly threats. Morthax came last, documenting every safety violation in his personal log with the dedication of someone planning a very detailed complaint. The canopy layer was a revelation. Up here, the forest was a different world entirely. The breeze Marcus mentioned was real, a gentle circulation that carried away the oppressive humidity. The rain didn't reach them through the layered foliage. The temperature was actually comfortable. The view stretched across the canopy ocean, waves of green and bioluminescent blues pulsing in patterns that were, Quibble reluctantly admitted, actually quite beautiful. "This is illegal," Morthax said, sitting in a hammock Marcus had just completed for him, swaying gently 50 feet above the ground. "Completely against protocol." "Yep," Marcus agreed, starting work on another platform. "The structural integrity hasn't been verified by certified engineers." "Nope. We have no safety harnesses, no emergency descent equipment, no proper anchoring certification. Not a bit. This is the most comfortable I've been since we landed," Morthax finished, sounding betrayed by his own honesty. Marcus just smiled and kept building. Over the next several days, the canopy camp expanded with organic efficiency. Marcus taught them the basics of arboreal architecture, how to read the tree's natural strengths, where to place platforms for stability, how to weave hammocks that could support different body types and limb configurations. Quibble turned out to have an unexpected talent for knot tying, his crystalline digits providing precision human fingers couldn't match. Tix and Vree used their natural bioluminescence to mark safe paths through the branches at night. Clawn's multiple eyes, once he got over the height anxiety, proved invaluable for spotting structural weaknesses and optimal building locations. Morthax documented everything, unable to break the habit, his reports growing increasingly detailed about construction techniques that violated every regulation he had memorized. They built rain catches to collect drinking water, since the acidic precipitation became perfectly safe once filtered through the natural canopy layers. Marcus showed them how to identify which local fruits were safe to eat. Apparently, humans had been doing the taste it and see if you die method of food science for millennia, which explained a lot about their species. They constructed rope bridges between platforms, creating an interconnected village suspended in the massive trees. The forest's nocturnal predators, it turned out, were exclusively ground-based. The aerial space belonged to much smaller, harmless creatures whose bioluminescent displays were actually mating rituals, which was simultaneously beautiful and vaguely uncomfortable once you understood what you were watching. "I can't believe this is working," Clawn said one evening, watching the light show while swaying in his hammock. All 7 of his eyes were relaxed, no longer calculating doom probabilities. "Why wouldn't it work?" Marcus asked, roasting something that might have been a local tuber over his small fire. "Humans have been living in trees since before we invented the wheel. Well, some humans, others preferred caves. We're adaptable like that." The Bureau said this planet was Class 7 Uninhabitable. Vree pointed out, their bioluminescence flickering with amusement. "The Bureau says a lot of things," Marcus said. "Usually from climate-controlled offices far away from actual planets." "This is going in my report," Morthax muttered. But he was smiling, which was unsettling on a grell face, but somehow appropriate. They conducted their actual scientific work from the Canopy platforms, which turned out to be significantly more effective than ground-based research. Clawn's botanical surveys were more comprehensive with access to multiple forest layers. Tix and Vree catalogued hundreds of insect species that never descended to ground level. Quibble's geological surveys were admittedly more challenging from tree height, but he seemed content to mostly complain about moisture and enjoy the view. The days developed a rhythm: morning climbs to check equipment, scientific work during the day, communal evenings in the hammock village, where they shared food and compared notes, and gradually stopped mentioning safety protocols. The forest remained objectively dangerous: aggressive flora, chemical rain, predators that could swallow a human whole, but from the canopy, it was also manageable. Beautiful, even. On the 10th day, Marcus built a swing. "Why?" Morthax asked, watching the human construct something with absolutely no scientific purpose. "Why not?" Marcus replied, which was apparently sufficient human logic. Clawn tried it first, his multiple limbs flailing as he swung through empty air, making a sound somewhere between terror and laughter. Then everyone had to try it, because peer pressure existed across species barriers. Even Morthax took a turn, documenting the experience with his personal recorder, while simultaneously experiencing something dangerously close to joy. The rescue shuttle arrived on schedule, 14 days after the pod malfunction, their pilots expressing confusion at the coordinates they received. "We're here for the emergency extraction," the pilot transmitted. "But your beacon is showing you're 50 meters above ground level." "That's correct," Morthax responded from his hammock. "We'll be down shortly, probably." "Are you safe? Do you require medical assistance?" They looked at each other, 5 aliens and 1 human, suspended in a village of platforms and hammocks and rope bridges that absolutely violated every construction standard in the Bureau's extensive library. "We're fine," Claude said. "Better than fine, actually." "Do you want to come down?" the pilot asked, clearly confused. There was a pause, a long pause. "Give us a minute," Marcus finally said. They did come down eventually, though the process took longer than necessary because everyone kept going back up for one more item, one more sample, one more look at the view. They documented everything with extensive hollows, Morthax's safety violation report, transforming into something closer to an architectural manual. Tix and Vri marked the location coordinates in their personal databases, already planning return trips. The pilot stared at the Canopy village as they boarded. "What is that?" "Home improvement," Marcus said. "Human specialty." Back in orbit, they filed their expedition reports. Claude's botanical survey was comprehensive. Tix and Vri's entomological data filled 3 research databases. Quibble's geological assessment was thorough despite his limited ground access. Morthax's documentation was extraordinary, detailing every aspect of their experience with the precision of someone who had memorized regulations and then systematically ignored them. The Interstellar Ecological Assessment Bureau received their reports with bureaucratic confusion. Verdis 9 had been classified Class-7 Uninhabitable. The expedition had been conducted under emergency conditions due to equipment failure. Yet somehow, the team reported not only successful scientific research, but extensive documentation of sustainable habitation methods using local materials and arboreal construction techniques. 3 committees were formed to investigate the discrepancy. 5 subcommittees were formed to investigate the committees. Morthax's construction documentation was circulated among engineering departments with subject lines ranging from innovative field techniques to "Please tell me this is satire." The final official report upgraded Verdis 9 to inhabitable with alternative methodologies, which was bureaucratic speak for "we were wrong, but we'll never admit it directly." The accompanying hollows showed an extensive canopy village complete with platforms, hammocks, rope bridges, water collection systems, and inexplicably, a swing. Marcus's notation on his personal report was brief. 10 tents would hammock again. Bring more rope next time. Within 2 months, 3 team members had submitted requests to extend research on Verdis 9. Within 6 months, the Bureau received 17 applications from various researchers requesting assignment to the supposedly uninhabitable planet. Within a year, there was a waiting list. The Interstellar Ecological Assessment Bureau, to their credit, did eventually update their classification protocols. They added a new category, Class-7 Uninhabitable unless you ask a human first. It wasn't official. It didn't appear in any formal documentation, but it circulated through the research departments, passed between scientists who had spent too long trusting instruments over instinct, regulations over reality. Because sometimes the difference between uninhabitable and livable wasn't the planet. It was knowing where to hang your hammock.